So was it a good idea to install flexible solar panels on my RV? Some people said they would be junk in 1 year. Some people said they would only be putting out half of the power. So today we find out. Now it gets extremely hot where I live. The summers can get over 115 degrees for a few days out of the year, but it's over 100 degrees many days out of the year during the summers. I live way up in Northern California. It's one of the hottest places in the state and even one of the hottest places in the nation. So this gives them a really good test run to see how they do during the summer and in extreme temperatures. So we're gonna get testing the panels. This is from 2 weeks earlier where I washed them, and I also had good clear conditions to test them.
Now this is what my original setup looked like. I had the 5 solar panels in the back as one array. These are all in series. And the other 5 solar panels towards the front where I had 2 of them going side to side. This ends up giving a lot of shade problems, and then I did have a SIG solar panel which I've since removed. This is what my current array looks like. In the back, I still have the original 5 with 1 solar panel moving towards the rear, and then the 3 that are on the left are in series, and the 3 that are in the right are also in series, and those parallel in. This allows much better production during the day as I don't have as much shade problems.
Okay, so I just got done washing the roof, and we're gonna check all these panels together to see how well they're actually doing after being up here for almost a year. I'm only about 15 days out from the first initial install. I actually added 1 more panel over here, and so that brings me up to 11. And so what I did is I added 3 on this side, I have those 3 on that side, and they basically, these 3 are in series, and the same thing with those 3 are in series, and then they parallel in. That way I don't lose basically this whole array when one side gets shaded from, mainly the AC units. So that was definitely a problem with shading, is that I would lose basically that whole array after half of it got shaded one of these panels. And so it dropped me down to maybe 40 to 60 watts out of 5 panels. The 5 panels that were back here, which I had 5 in series and another 5 in series, but that whole top section up there, that whole array was almost dead. So I was losing a lot of production throughout the day. So we'll go ahead and start testing these, and then we'll see what we get. Okay, so we're gonna use 2 meters just to make sure we get the same kind of numbers during a voltage open circuit test. And so right now we're gonna test panel number 1 right here. We're gonna mark everything down on a piece of tape. That way I can keep track of my data. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this, but the voltage for our open circuit right now is 22.5. I'm going to go ahead and put a load on this, and we'll see what our Pmax is while it's under load. And right now it's calculating, and we're going to move a little bit faster after we get going. Now the temperature today, it's about probably 78, maybe 80 degrees right now. So this is going to run a few tests, and we're going to take the average after it does about 3. And just to kind of show you the first one, after we get going, I'm going to move along much faster just to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing. So that's 2 tests already. We're going to do a 3rd one here in a second and kind of see. But right now, 173.5 is probably what we're going to mark this panel at. I'm going to give it another. And so 173.9. So I'm going to drop it down 173.5 for now. And just to kind of give you an idea of the conditions right now, our sun is almost at peak, and we do have a slight haze in the sky, but so far it's not bad conditions. Okay, this is panel number 2. Now I did just wash these, so I'm assuming voltage, or at least our wattage, is going to start dropping. I've been letting them sit for about 20 minutes since I washed them, so I'm assuming they're going to get quite a bit higher. But 167.7, we'll let it run again a couple more, and then we'll write it down. 167.5 is where we're going to live on this one. Okay, so panel number 3, we're looking at about 164.5 is where I'm going to drop that at. And I'm assuming as these panels do get hotter, they are going to drop a little bit. So we will come back and probably do number 1 one more time. Okay, so now we're at panel number 4. We're at about 156.3. This is after about 4 tests, so we're pretty much going to mark, well, it went up a little bit. So I'll wait one more time. I'm just going to mark 156.5. And I do have this haze. It is kind of starting to go away, so that might be one of the reasons that we're getting those lower numbers. Okay, now we're looking at panel number 5. Okay, so panel number 5 coming out to right around 158 and some low 160s. I'm assuming as these are now getting hotter, but we are going to come back and do another test. I'm going to mark it 160. Okay, so now we're going to do 6, 7, and 8. And these ones have a little bit of a curve, especially the front one. So these ones are not going to perform as good as the other ones. The flatter you can keep a flexible panel, obviously the better. Kind of like how the rear have a curve as well, that will actually affect your output. So it's better to have any kind of flexible panel you can as flat as you can, and don't walk on them. I've told people this all the time. You see commercials or, people telling you can walk on these. Don't do it, especially these type. You can fracture, micro-fracture all the cells in there, and that will just destroy your output. All right, so 157 on number 6. A 156. I'll mark 156. Okay, this is panel number 7, and remember what I said about the curves. That is going to affect our output a little bit. But this one still isn't doing too bad. 152.9. I'm going to mark 152.5 because I'm assuming it will drop just a pinch. Okay, panel number 8, and this one has the big curve in the front, so depending on the angle of your trailer, this one will be affected a lot, at least for me, because it does dip a lot down that way. Okay, so that's about 5 tests, and not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I figured I was going to get low 140s, maybe even upper 130s, but it's been hovering pretty much right there at 149 after. That's about the 5th one. We'll do one more. Let's go 6. And 147.4, so let's just do 146 for fun. Okay, just so you guys can't see, we do have a little bit of a haze back in the sky, so this might drop our input a little bit. Okay, so this panel has been pretty much hovering about 149 to 153. We'll give it another one just so you guys can see where it goes. There's a 154. I'm just going to mark it at about a 152 right now, so it kind of depends, and overall these panels are performing pretty well right now. There's a 156, so maybe that haze is starting to go away. Okay, so now we're at panel number 10, and I'm thinking this was my damage panel, but overall it's still not doing bad. We're going to check it with the infrared here in a minute. 149.6, 152.3, and a 153.3. And a 151.6, so let's just do 152. Okay, now this is panel number 11, and this one is brand new. I actually just got this one, and I just put it up here, so it's only been up here for about a week as I've been finishing other projects. But as we take a look at this one, we're getting around 157, so not doing bad, and pretty much around where all the other ones are, so that's pretty good considering, we're under the same conditions. Nothing's, really different up here. I got to rewire some stuff because I added this one, so it changes my setup a little bit. But all the other ones are coming out the same after being up here for a year. And again, the temperatures, they've gone through 115 plus degrees with this roof being in the 130s before. And that's even just surface temperatures of everything else, like that thing being 130 over there, and along with the roof and the panels being really hot. So it's just showing you that the panels are still doing really well after being up here for a year or so. But we are going to go ahead and mark this one at 155 watts. Okay, and just to show you, I am back at number 1, and we're at 165.9 at the moment, so about 10 less, so that's probably the temperature difference now since these have been up here cooking in the sun after I washed them. So now that they're kind of more ambient to the temp that's out here and sitting up here for about a good hour after being washed, hovering right around 165 watts, pretty much consistent. And this one was 167, and then the other ones are 165. So I'm going to check these off camera just to double check, and we'll see what's changed. Okay, out of this back array, I will normally see 750 watts consistently with it parked in my backyard right here, and higher when I am out camping, depending on how I am angled to the sun. Now, depending on conditions outside, I have seen peaks of 940 to 960 watts out of the 5 panels back here on this back section. That usually is when cloud effect is happening or the conditions are perfect and the temperatures are a little bit lower. But 750 to about 850 is kind of the normal that I will see out of these back 5 panels. Now, since I am changing the configuration up front here, it's going to be different, but this would also supply me a full 1600 watts when the whole thing was up and running, depending how I was angled to the sun. But that was with 10 panels. Now I have 11 panels, and this is obviously a different configuration with 3 and 3. Now, some people, they remember when I had this done the first time, my panel configuration was different. I had a panel going side to side right here, and that's what it looks like after being pulled off. off, and it was there for a full year under extreme heat conditions. That's what it looks like underneath it there. It took me about probably 20 minutes to peel that off, and a little bit of the double-sided tape is actually left over, but I did it when it was cold out, so it peeled off pretty nice. And then I did have another panel also going sideways right here, and I had a SIG solar panel right there, but because of the drop over there, it ended up being really bad as far as its performance, and I figured it would, but it was hard to get really over 100 watts out of it because of the amount of bend. Again, you want to keep these as flat as possible. I'd really like to move that one, but there's not really anywhere else to put it. But again, you can see after being up there almost a year, going through summer, a lot of dirt and a lot of rain, even some hail, that's what the bottom of the roof looks like. That was about 50 weeks, I think, of that panel being there, so almost a full year. Okay, so I wanted to show you what a 200 watt rigid panel looks like. This one is from Bouge RV. It's a 9BB, and honestly, this thing's kind of a piece of junk. Don't buy it. It's not worth it. There are much better solar panels, and this one's already got spidering going on and snail trails, so don't get this, but still, it's been performing pretty consistent. Every time I test it, I get pretty much the same results. And if you take a look at how many watts meter square I'm getting over 1,000. So that's what you want when you're doing STC's testing. At least that's part of it. And then if we come take a look down here again at our meter, 161 watts. Now this is only one solar panel to compare with, but again, it's just, you know, something to give you an idea that the rigid panel, which this is normally what I see out of this, is 160 to 170-ish something, depending on when I've been testing it. But that gives you an idea of what this rigid is compared to those flexibles up there.
Now, I did want to show you some thermal imaging real quick, and this is an art in itself because you're supposed to be a certain distance and also a certain angle, and this camera does have a zoom lens on it. Now, as you can see, there is one spot, this one right here. This has been pretty consistent, and this is the panel that I think I damaged. You could also notice the surface temperatures. It's about 85 degrees now, and this is actually temperatures you will see on glass panels as well. They all get extremely hot.
Okay, so when we tested all those solar panels, you have to remember that I don't have any control on how they're laying on top of the RV. So when you see me testing solar panels, I'm usually going for peak numbers, a brand new panel that's clean and it has optimal angle to the sun. That's going to provide me peak numbers versus on top of the RV, you don't get that. You get what reality is you get whatever you get of the angle of what's on top of your RV roof. So your optimal angles are only going to be at a certain time of the day, and one side might be at optimal and the other side is going to already be off of optimal angle. So your results as far as your peak wattage out of each panel is going to be lower. And so now the reality is you get the real world results of what your solar is on top of the RV roof. So now instead of 2,200 watts, I average about 1,750 during the peak solar hours of the day. And that ends up being about 157 watts per panel. Now again, if I took these off and put them on the ground, they could easily go up 10 to 20 watts per panel if I had them at optimal angles. So now what are some of the pros and cons when it comes to the flexible solar panels? Now, one of the first pros is going to be installation. Obviously, super easy. Most anybody can do it. No special tools required. You get some VHB tape, you put them on the back, or either some sealant, you stick them on where you want, and then you're pretty much done. Now, the second pro is obviously the weight. These only weigh 10 pounds versus a normal rigid 200 watt panel is going to be anywhere about 24 to 26 pounds. So if you were to add up each panel, let's say 25 pounds, I would have over 275 pounds of material up on my roof by the time you added the brackets for mounting it, the sealants, the tape, and then the screws as well. So there's a huge difference, about 165 pound difference, because these 10 or 11 panels, they're only 110 pounds. So that's a big difference, plus a little VHB tape. So huge difference when it comes to the overall max weight that your RV can carry. And you would be surprised how many people overload their trailers. And people are not checking what their trailer weighs, so they are overloading them, breaking leaf springs, cracking frames, and more. So if you're not weighing your trailer and finding out what your max payload is and knowing how much you're allowed to carry and where you are fully loaded, that's something you should probably check. And number three is going to be aerodynamically. These are going to be way better. They're not going to have as much drag really at all because they're completely flat on the roof. You don't have a layer between the roof and the solar panel. This is going to create a higher and low pressure, creating drag, and you're going to have those little vortices that come off the back like a trucker does. This is why you see truck drivers and more, they're adding wakeboards at the very back of the trailer. They're adding the underskirting as well, because that's going to gain them anywhere from 0.25 to 1 mile per gallon better. And that adds up over time. If you are a long hauler, if you travel a lot in your RV, that's a lot of fuel that you could be saving potentially by having less drag and less weight on your RV. Now, something people don't really talk about as much is that they're a lot less dangerous. Flexible panels, well, think about it. If one flies off, and they do, which one would you rather hit? Think about it. A rigid panel can actually be deadly. It can puncture through a windshield and possibly kill that driver or a passenger, or maybe if you're a motorcyclist, it does happen. And if there really is one more pro, I guess it would be if you were to move the solar panel, well, then you wouldn't have holes in your roof as far as drilling holes on a rigid panel. But if you do remove a flexible panel and it really is stuck down, it can actually lift your roof material off of the actual boards. So that's something to think about. Okay, now as far as cons go on flexible solar panels, well, really it's going to be the price. They are at least 50% higher typically, depending on when you buy them. Now, if you find them on sale, you can get them at a really good price. So it just depends. And I'll have links of all the stuff I use down below. That way you guys can see exactly what I used and what I bought. Now, I'm not telling you to buy this stuff. That's up to you whether this is something you want to use, or if you want to go rigid or a totally different type of panel. That's not my decision. I'm just giving you the information. Now, another con is obviously going to be longevity. The rigid panels are going to last longer. The flexible ones definitely don't have the technology to last, but their technology is getting better. Now, some people said they'll be dead in a year, maybe 3 years, and maybe 10 years or better. These do have a 20-year warranty. That's if Renogy is even around in 20 years, which who knows what companies will come and go by then. But I also built this trailer for me today and not for the next guy in 7 to 10 years. Most people, they sell their recreational items, whether it's a boat or an RV, it's usually sold within an average of 7 years. So I don't really care too much about what happens later. The person who gets the trailer next is going to get a great deal. They're going to have a whole bunch of free solar. And even if it's putting out, 50%, good for them. They're going to get, a great deal again, and they'll be happy that something's up there providing power. And a couple more cons as far as flexible solar panels is that, one, they are a little bit more fragile. So when you are installing them, if they're really hot, they can get very flexible. And this is what can cause some micro cracking on the cells. So you do want to be careful when installing them and not to flex them too much. And then again, number 4 is going to be kind of the performance. A rigid panel is going to perform about 5, maybe 10% better overall. So that is another thing to consider when purchasing these. So you're really looking at weight. You're also looking at ease of installation, and then also aerodynamically, if that's going to be a big deal to you or not. Now, rigid panel pros, well, obviously the price, they're definitely cheaper, so it's going to save you money on your install. Number 2, they are better at performing better. So again, we talked about that. So your overall performance on rigid is going to be better. Number 3 is going to be the longevity of a rigid panel, again, is going to be better. So, another pro. And number 4, well, when it comes to install, they're not as fragile. So if you do drop one, well, you can damage your roof, or you can actually shatter the glass panel completely. So there are some pros and cons a little bit, but overall they are a little bit more durable. So you don't have to worry too much as far as, damaging them when you are installing them. Now, what about cons of rigid panels? Well, one of the biggest ones is going to be your install time. It takes a lot longer to install rigid panels, because when you place them, you want to make sure that that's where they go, because you're going to be drilling screws, and you want to make sure you drill them into the right spots. And then you have all the tape that you have to put down, the sealants you have to put down, and then you want to make sure that you go up and maintain them. And that's one of the cons of rigid panels. And number 2 is going to be maintenance. You're going to have to go up there and reseal where you put the screws into, and you want to make sure that the screws are not backing out. Remember, this is a cardboard box that goes down the road. It flexes, and every time you're doing this with wood and a roof, just like a fence, those holes are becoming oblonged. And I guarantee if you go check some of the screws on your existing solar panels on your roof, you will find some of them that are loose or maybe even starting to back out. Number 3 is going to be weight. Again, you're adding a lot more weight when it comes to rigid panels, especially if you start getting into those bigger residential panels. Those things can weigh a lot. So you want to make sure that you're leaving yourself enough room as far as all the things you want to carry and your max payload on your trailer. And then really the only other con, I guess, would be, again, the danger factor. If they did fly off, you know, you got to remember that you are responsible. If that was to fly off and hit somebody, you're going to be the one who's going to be paying the price if it does happen to kill somebody or injure somebody seriously. So what do you guys think? Now, I know there's not a lot of channels out there that actually go out and utilize the stuff that they review. I use a lot of the stuff that I review versus some channels, they go out and they review something. You never really see them use any of the products. They call themselves a lab or whatever, and then they've never used a product in their life and they never will again after that video. If you look at a lot of my videos, I review and I test and I use a lot of the products today that I've actually reviewed, and a lot of the stuff I do buy on my own. So it's up to you whether the information I give you is helpful and whether you want to buy that product or not, because again, there's pros and cons to everything. Now, I hope this video helped you out, and if you are interested in the products I used, I will have the links down in the description below, so be sure to check out my other videos as well, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.